Uh, Hi, I'm Dave Hutchinson. My short story is called Babylon. It's set about 50 on an island in the Mediterranean.
Okay, great. So maybe if you could just tell me a bit about the story, why you chose those themes and ideas, and why that particular vision of the future.
Yeah, I've been writing a lot over the past about near future Europe, but it's always been Northern Europe and Central Europe. And I realised that I really haven't tackled the issues that are facing Southern Europe at the moment, and particularly the refugee crisis. So I wanted to have a go at that, and I wanted to look at the way that the EU and Europe in general is walling itself off from the countries of the south. And so the story kind of tackles that. It's about somebody trying to infiltrate southern Europe from Somalia.
Okay, so do you think that's the kind of story you would have written 6 or 12 months ago, or is it something that's kind of come out of recent events?
I've been wanting to work, sort of look at the issues of the refugee crisis. So perhaps I might have done it 12 months ago. 2 or 3 years ago, perhaps I wouldn't have done.
Right. Okay. Um, because I mean, obviously, we're finding at the moment then there's been this a big revival of interest in Orwell, based around 1984, and some of the ideas presented in that book. And obviously, the anthology is kind of calling back to that principle and that idea. So, I mean, do you have any thoughts on kind of why you think that's happening, and if it's Orwell in particular, or if there's other authors involved, or just what this revival means?
I think there is a general uncertainty about the world at the moment, particularly over the last, well, I'll call it the last year. And like, there's a kind of, I can remember what things were like 2 years ago when we were sort of comfortable in the old certainties. You know, we hated the Tory government, and there was austerity, and everything seemed to be ticking along quite nicely in retrospect. And then all of a sudden, everything seems to have been upturned, and I think we're quite fearful of the future now. Quite why we're turning to sort of darker visions of the future to comfort ourselves, I don't know. Um, Perhaps we're reading those to think, well, maybe things could be worse, although it's hard to see how.
Sure. One of the things that strikes me about Orwell is I mean, you get dark ideas in other science fiction. I mean, the Terminator comes up all the time, and you'll get moments
Mm.
where there's a war. But I think the thing I strikes me about Orwell is that a lot of the darkness comes from humanity and the political systems.
Yeah, that's
Um,
right. Yeah.
yeah, and I suppose I find there's something interesting about the way that this sudden lurch in global politics has led to a very dramatic change in the kind of fiction people are looking for, I suppose.
Yeah, again, I think maybe far be it from me to sort of guess what goes on in readers' heads, but I mean, 1984 has always been a popular book. I don't think it's ever been out of print since it was published. Um, but again, I think perhaps we're looking for some kind of signpost to what the future would be like. And in reality, I don't think there are any signposts. I think we're in totally uncharted territory now. We're in a world which we just cannot predict. I couldn't possibly have predicted President Trump, and I think we can all agree that there is no way to predict what he's going to do from one week to the next. So I don't know. Maybe people are looking for a concrete certainty that things are going to be really bad. I don't know. Really don't know.
Okay. Yeah, it's a question I've always had about dystopian fiction. I wonder, do you think it's easier to come up with a way of destroying something and pointing out all of the flaws with it than it is to present something that can't be dismantled?
Oh yes, absolutely, absolutely. Um, I've been sitting here struggling to think of examples of utopias in science fiction that actually work, and really the only one I can come up with is the culture in Ian M. Banks's novels. But even the culture is, I mean, it looks great on the outside, but it's terribly meddlesome. It's always sort of meddling in other people's affairs, which for me is a kind of a strike against it. It knows better than anybody else.
Yeah, I
Whereas, sorry, a dystopia is there's a whole lot more sort of fascinating mechanics to a dystopia. There's more room to play with, I think.
okay. So it's partly easier to work with as a writer as well as
Oh yes, yeah.
right. Okay.
I mean, I admire writers who tackle utopias because I think they're much harder to make interesting for a reader because I suppose by definition in a utopia not a lot happens. And also you have to remember that one person's dystopia is another person's utopia. I always like to think that Big Brother is really having quite a good time. You know,
Yeah.
you look at North Korea, Kim Jong Un is having the time of his life. He's not aware that it's a dystopia.
So there's some truth in that. I was at Nine Worlds and there was a panel session, and Aaliyah Whiteley, actually, who's also written a story for the anthology, said something about utopias can only work when there's no hope. Basically, when there's no desire or will to change things.
Yeah, I think there's some truth in that. I think, yeah.
Yeah, it sort of gives you a strange spin on the idea of utopia when you come at the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, we would like to. I mean, I suppose we all have an image of a perfect world or a world we would like to live in, but it's not necessarily going to be the perfect world that everybody would want to live in. Um, a socialist utopia would be quite unbearable for some people, and a right wing, not particularly everybody. Human nature is like that.
Sure. Yeah. Makes for worrying times, really. So.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, I meant to be saying positive through the interview, aren't another one of the thoughts. I mean, in 1984, the world there is it's divided into three supercontinents, which they're always at war, and it's that eternal state of we've always been at war with Eurasia or East Asia,
Yeah.
and that absolutely kind of binary moment where the truth just flips. And there's also a sense of the world being a much smaller place. Now, I can see those concerns being kind of very relevant back in 48, when you're looking at the sort of the birth of the United Nations and the formation of the modern world.
Yeah.
So I wonder, do you have any thoughts on what the kind of the world will see in 2084?
A couple of years ago, I could have had a stab at that, but I literally have no idea now. A lot of the old certainties seem to have been washed away over the past year or so, and it's difficult to predict. I suspect the world will be pretty much like it is now, just a bit more beaten up, run down. We really are, I think, on a cusp of some great change at the moment, and it really is impossible to say how it's going to shake out. How far the rise of the right in Europe is going to go is impossible to say, and that is going to change things in Europe for the next, I don't know, 50, 60 years. What effect the current American president is going to have, because he has changed things unimaginably in the past 4 weeks.
Yeah. What
he's going to be able to do in the next 4 years, I have no idea. So it really is hard to sort of say with any great certainty what I think is going to happen. I suspect in 2048 we will still be here just bumbling along and trying to get by like we always have.
Okay. Do you think we'll be going towards greater unity or away from it?
No, I think we'll be going away from it.
Right. Okay. What
Absolutely.
do you think we'll see World War Three?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I think if there are any wars, I think they'll be small and localized. I don't think there is any. Well, I hate to sort of nail my colours to the mast here, but I don't think there is any great sort of will for a world war. I can see a lot of sort of small proxy wars, but we've been going through that phase of human history for decades.
Sure.
You know,
Um,
I really don't think that things are going to be all that different.
okay.
Um, keep my fingers crossed anyway, because that's the best we can hope for, is that things aren't going to change very much.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it depends on which way you cut it, doesn't it?
I think there's a wonderful quote that William Gibson said about the world of Neuromancer, the sprawl. He said that that's the future we would have if we were lucky, and I think the future we have, if we're lucky, is going to be just more of the same.
Okay. Okay. That's not sounding like a massively optimistic line of reasoning. I'm just going to say.
Yes, I'm a little ray of sunshine, really. Yeah.
Well, this is good from a dystopian fiction collection. This is the kind of thing we're after, isn't it?
Yes.
Um, I mean, one of the things that struck me about your story as well is you've there's science fiction technology in it, but
Yeah.
it's all very much kind of low key and plausible. And some of the other writers have gone for much more kind of high tech futures. There might be drones and kind of a sense of a changed landscape.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so is that just a personal preference thing, or do you think technology is going to be restrained?
It's really a personal preference thing. I mean, I'm 56 now, and the year I was born, things like heart transplants or men walking on the moon was still science fiction. But I see the increments of change getting smaller and smaller and smaller as I get older. There's no sort of great technological change coming along. It's more in discrete packets, like 3D printing, which is still an emerging technology. There's no great big technological change that I see, which is going to sort of shake up society. So that I mean, I just I always think of the future as being a bit like now, just a bit more run down. And it just depends how far down the line you go, how run down things are. If you'd set the anthology in 2584, I might have had a completely different view of the future. But I think 2084, I think I'm fairly safe thinking that things aren't going to be that much different. I mean, the story involves nanotechnology, which is the nanotechnology in the story is utterly implausible at the moment. So there's going to have to be some really serious R&D going on to have that kind of thing available at the time the story is set.
Sure. Okay. So I suppose yeah, it comes back to that idea of there being a singularity event, some moment that changes things, like the Second World War or the atomic bomb or something like that. And I suppose that
Yeah.
is the kind of thing you can't predict, almost by definition.
Well, it was impossible to predict the atomic bomb, I suppose, unless you were a science fiction writer, I suppose. But yeah, these things tend to come out of left field. I mean, the singularity. I suppose by definition, the singularity is something we're not going to see coming.
Yeah.
We can't sort of stock up on tinned food and bottled water and wait for it to happen. This is going to just happen.
Yeah. Although some people are stocking up on bottled water and tin food as we speak, in fact.
I mean, I watch the news some days and I'm tempted to do that myself.
I do actually have a friend who I saw at the weekend who was talking about getting some property or possibly a couple of places across the country and just
Hmm.
starting to stockpile. It's a sort of a nervous laugh that you have at that point.
Yeah, and I can't remember a time when people have felt like this since, I don't know. I guess the really hottest parts of the Cold War. And if people are sort of reacting to, and these are really the early days of the change. We haven't left the EU. The EU is still intact. The Trump administration is 4 weeks old. Well, this is really the infancy of whatever is going to happen, if anything does happen. So if people are feeling like that now, what are they going to feel like in 2 years, 3 years' time? Well, it's impossible to say. But
Yeah,
that's the fun of it. It's the fun of science fiction is always what if, not what I think is going to happen.
yes, I suppose that's true, isn't it? Yeah. I always remember my dad saying, and in fact, with the Cold War, that there was a very real sense that it could happen. A real
Mm.
sense that it could. The bombs would be launched and people would die, and that would be it, and it'd be over. And in some respects, I feel like I can understand that better than ever now. And in other respects, I
Mhm.
also think I still don't have a clue because
I remember the nuclear scare of the 80s with uh, dramas like Threads and the Raymond Briggs book and film When the Wind Blows, and all those government information films about building a safe room in your house and about putting your dead relatives in bin bags and leaving them outside. You know, we really were getting ready for something to happen. And we look back on that now and think, oh, we were a bit silly, weren't we? But we weren't. We were actually quite scared. And the world got through it somehow.
yeah. What was it the line about history repeating first as tragedy, then as farce?
And a third time was pantomime. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so I suppose this time around would be pantomime, but I
It's
suppose
pantomime this time. Yeah. But I mean, we actually are in a serious time, and things could get very bad. But how? I I don't know. The rise of the right across Europe and the alt right in the United States is very scary. But I I'm not confident enough to be able to predict where that will lead us. Brexit could be a complete and utter catastrophe for us, and the EU countries looking at our example may decide, right, we're not going to leave. Um, Trump will almost certainly be a one-term president. He may not even make it to the end of his first term, and so things might not be quite so bad. It's impossible to say. It's the old Chinese curse. We live in interesting times.
yeah.
Oh, come on, George! The
It's all right.
writer. It's such a great time. Oh, it's kind of awful, but it's also sort of it's so rich with possibility.
That's
You
true.
know,
Yeah. I
the
suppose
nineties were so bloody dull.
that they were, but I suppose I mean, there is so much uncertainty in the air, and there's dramatic changes in what politics is tolerable is one thing. I find the attempted abolition of facts to be quite troubling as well.
Yes,
The
yeah,
sense that information is now very much malleable again, and kind of re-entering a propaganda age, which I suppose is again rich territory for writers and for our fictions of the future.
it is. I didn't see that coming, and I didn't. It surprised me how people are falling for it. This repeated line of fake news and sort of facts just coming out of nowhere. I mean, I suppose the one that's on everybody's mind at the moment is Trump's assertion that something awful happened in Sweden last week. And what happened was that apparently he claims that he was talking about a documentary that was on Fox News, which didn't mention anything terrible happening in Sweden last week. But for millions of people watching that rally, their president said that something awful happened in Sweden, and therefore something awful happened in Sweden, and it becomes history as far as they're concerned. And it's interesting how reality can become. We saw it a lot in the referendum campaign here, particularly with the bus. There's this bus saying we give £350 million a year or a week or whatever it was to the EU. Let's give it to the NHS. That was never ever going to happen, you know. And when you know people who are in the Leave campaign are called on it, they say, well, no, it was just election banter. But it did sway people, and it troubles me that that kind of thing is happening. It's almost sort of, what is it? Ignorance is power or something. So some of Orwell's buzzwords. Work will make you free.
Yeah, well, work will make you free is not one of Orwell's,
I know.
is it?
No, it's not. No, sorry. Just erase that. Edit that out. Sorry, I was distracted.
But yes, no, it's true. There's a kind of, I suppose, there's more of a desire to find a narrative that fits than there is to have to deal with large, complicated bodies of information that you then have to process and understand yourself.
Yeah, facts. The truth. It's easier for a demagogue like Trump to stand up and just say whatever comes off the top of his head, and then afterwards people come behind him and clear up for him and say, well, no, the president didn't mean that, he meant that. But he's actually said it. He's influenced people. People listen to him. People believe him. So, as a writer, that's quite a fascinating thing, and it's something I'd like to tackle at some point. Although I'm rushed off my feet at the moment, so it'll take a while.
Just stick it in the bank of ideas along with the other 400.
I'll write it on the back of an envelope and stick it in a folder with everything else.
Yes. So, I mean, with all of this kind of lack of control, essentially, is it sounds like it's one of the big themes here, and people trying to go for that. I mean, does that mean you think dystopias come about as people trying to find something they can understand and kind of use that as a way of predicting the future, or is it just catharsis and something more emotional, just kind of venting a part of the uncertainty?
I think there's elements of all of that. It's good to read a fictional dystopia, and a lot of the dystopias I've encountered in fiction are ones which are opposed and brought down, and there is catharsis in that. Of course, 1984, there is no happy ending. It just goes on and on and on, and there's no hope, really. I find it interesting that a lot of the dystopias, in fact, the keynote dystopias of our time are actually in young adult fiction. Things like The Hunger Games. Yeah. And I find that interesting. That kind of is very popular amongst younger readers, and I'm not sure why that is, but I do find that interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't really thought about it, actually.
It occurred to me a little while ago, and there's a thing called the Maze Runner.
Yeah.
I think, and
Divergent series and other ones.
Divergent, yeah. I mean, these are all young adult fictions, and they're all set in dystopias. And of course, in publishing, things go, fashions come and go. But it interests me that dystopias in YA fiction are so popular.
Perhaps it's because with a dystopia creating a dysfunctional society and something you can kind of explain is broken, the does allow you narratively to empower an individual to come in and change it, and be the force for change and to rectify things.
Yeah. I mean, there is an aspect of sort of appealing to. I'm generalising too much here, but it appeals to sort of the teen sense of rebellion.
Yeah.
So what are you rebelling against? What have you got?
It's that kind of emerging identity as well, isn't it? Just
Yeah.
I'm here, and this is my world. I'm going to take it.
There's another dystopia. I can't remember the title. There's Christian Bale is in it. It's a world where everybody is taking drugs to suppress emotions.
Oh, Gattaca.
No. It's not Gattaca. It's
No.
begins with E. I'll remember it after we've hung up.
Equilibrium.
Equilibrium, yes. I really liked that. I thought that was a really interesting stab at a dystopia. But that was an adult one. That wasn't sort of YA. But again, Gattaca. You could say the world of Gattaca is a dystopia, but from another point of view, you could say, well, it's a utopia. It's a utopia of sort of genetically perfect people.
Just depends on whether you're engineered or not, I suppose.
Exactly. Yes, it's all down to where you stand in society, and who you are and where you are.
Yeah, I suppose inequality being one of the big themes of the time as well.
Indeed, yes, and we still have a very long way to go.
Yeah, Gattaca is probably one of the more prescient bits of cinema I can think of, actually, in that respect.
Good film.
Yes, yeah, very much so. I remember seeing it as a teenager and quite liking it, and then growing up a lot more and thinking I totally missed the point.
Yeah. No, so it was an original take. I enjoyed that.
Yeah. Okay, I think that puts me through all of the questions we had on the list.
Excellent.
Yeah. One last one. Have you got a personal favourite dystopia, if you have such a thing, or least? Is it your most favourite or your least favourite?
I don't think so. No. I can't think of one off the top of my head. Sorry.
No, fair enough.
Put me on the spot here. You sent me a list of questions before. I was all right.
No, you're right. It's the same thing when you walk in a bookshop and you go, "I want 400 books." It's just none of them I can remember.
No, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I'm afraid. I will probably think of something again as we hang up.
Yep. The Spirit d'Escalier.
Indeed so. Yes.